Now, the financial crimes is actually probably the only one that is leading with this genuine factual kind of heading, which is saying that the heading is Starling Effort. England recall the spirit of 1966. And England's Raheem Sterling wheels away after scoring his side's first goal during the Euro 2020 round of 16 match against Germany at Wembley Stadium. Now that's the heading of the financial crimes, and it's the financial crimes that is doing the pun on the word Starling. It's a double-edged pun, and the Daily Mail hasn't got the picture of Starling at all on the front page. There was 3 white faces, England 2, Germany 0, and by George we did it. We shouldn't have that racist, completely racist, in denial heading and front page. And they haven't got Starling even at the main pictures. Starling as the last photo on page 3 of the Daily Mail. So it's institutional and individual racism by the crooks of Fleet Street. So they haven't got Raheem Sterling at all in there. That he's the one who scored the goal. And even the I newspaper has got somebody else. It's not Raheem Sterling. The racists have got someone other than Raheem Sterling who scored the goal. And even the Daily Star hasn't got Starling as the main picture. It's somebody else. Nor has the Times. How dare the racists? It's not the Harry Kane who scored the goal. Nor did Williams. But their pictures are there. No picture of Raheem Sterling anywhere in the Times so far. And not his picture on the back page of the Times either. So this is absolute, total criminal racism by this sick Fleet Street. And the Times on page 13 is reporting the whiteness survey being the subject of the Oxfam staff. Oxfam has defined whiteness as the overarching preservation of power and domination for the benefit of white people in a survey on racial injustice, racial justice that has caused upset among staff. So the Times has got absolutely nothing about Raheem Sterling. And the Times has got the picture of another white person, Southgate, not of Raheem Sterling. These are absolutely pivotal pieces and places where the photograph of Raheem Sterling should have been. So this piece is, of course, page 1, continued to page 2 of the financial crimes that are the only item that we can find, because we didn't get the Scum print and we didn't get the Guardian print. Should look at the Guardian. The piece on page 2 that says the portrait by Freud of Haque sold for £15 million. Well, that takes us contextually to the Kitchen's house in Brick Lane. And Daniel Prinkelstein has got a piece with a favorable picture of the parasite, George Galloway, parasite of Battalion Span. Now, the only byline, Fleet Street byline, by Don Neeson on page 15 of the Daily Scar is about Matt Hancock, that is literally graphic about Matt Hancock. And the only piece that we can find in any Fleet Street about Battalion Spen that is critical of George Galloway is in this one, page 13 of the I paper. And it says, it feels like people are coming here to cause trouble. Well, that's a very mild way to put it. And Yasmin Alibai C again is lying in a kind of other side of the coin, but with a similar message. She is blaming the Muslims, and Galloway is abusing the Muslims. And she calls them white guys who harassed Chris Whitty in a park. The white guys who harassed Chris Whitty are not hoodlums, not white hoodlums at all. Notice what Yasmin Alibai C is like. She's a complete brazen, shameless, criminal, corrupt stooge. And there's a piece on the so-called opinion comment page of the Daily Mail, which got a picture of Nicola Sturgeon meeting Brenda. But the piece is by Gordon Brown. And there are the center pages of the, well, not center pages, these are pages 18 and 19, which has got the byline, How I See It, by Robert Hardman. And the main heading is The Poisoned Paul. Joe Cox's murder was a political tragedy. But 5 years later, a by-election in her seat, contested by her sister, has been tainted by racism assaults and sickening dog whistle tactics. Now, that's not true. It's actually George Galloway who has been causing the main problems. And that's what should be the main focus on. Whatever the actual outcome of the polling tomorrow, Thursday, the 1st of July, it should not be forgotten that George Galloway is the one that has been lying more than anyone else. And there is the term inequality is again used in a piece in the Financial Crimes, and this time it's Martin Wolf. I'm certain that he has had headings to his piece, his byline, containing the word inequality before, but it's not inequality universally defined that Martin Wolf or the Financial Crimes is talking about. Why? Because here is the evidence. There are 3 graphs there with the piece. And the heading to the graph in the middle clearly says the limited evidence does not suggest soaring wealth inequality. That's a financial crime criminally denying the truth. And it's contradicting the first one, the first graphic. It says central bankers increasingly woke on inequality. Woke is actually a pejorative word invented by racists and liars and agents of big business and inequality and racist cabals. So Martin Wolf is being stupid and dishonest and contradictory, as is the Financial Crimes. It says, but the necessary structural reforms will be harder than many observers imagine. So where does the liar think lies the solution to soaring inequality? He denies it, but it does exist. So this is the part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only online, that is on the internet, not on terrestrial, not on satellite, nor on cable platforms. This is part A of the edition for Wednesday, the 30th of June, 2021. We didn't broadcast any edition dated the 29th of June, Tuesday, the 29th of June, 2021. And the reason has been that the contents of the newspapers are absolutely dishonest, misleading, ignorant, and of course, overall racist. And therefore, the real diagnosis is based on the evidence of what the newspapers are supposed to be reporting on. The evidence, meaning the big issues of the so-called news dates or news day or news kind of line. So the running order, as they say in the broadcasting networks, the running order has been mainly, of course, COVID, Matt Hancock, and of course the Battalion Span by-election that is going to be formally held tomorrow, Thursday, 1st of July 2021. And the entirety of Fleet Street criminally is kind of mobilized against the candidate called Kim Leadbeater, who is the sister of the victim of the racist fascist murder, Joe Cox. Kim Leadbeater has been put in a position where all the failures of Keir Starmer, of the Labour Party, of the racists, of all parties and all kind of complexions have been laid at her door. She wasn't going to be a candidate at all, but it's a mayoral election in West Yorkshire that caused the vacancy in the parliamentary seat. And that is why Kim Leadbeater is a candidate for the Labour Party. The reason why they have chosen her, of course, is obvious, because of the sympathy factor. But she is also not tarnished by the majority of the ills of the Labour Party, locally or nationally. So it wasn't difficult to understand why she would have been chosen the candidate. But the narrative about Battalion Span and the narrative allegedly about the rights of the Muslims has been intentionally, poisonously, corruptly, distortedly misrepresented and abused by the parasite, the professional parasite called George Galloway. We shall be talking more about George Galloway and his professional parasitic career in due course. Suffice to say that Galloway is not an anti-racist. Galloway is not an opponent of imperialism. Galloway is not a supporter of the Muslims. Galloway is not a supporter of the Palestinians. Galloway is a person without any source of income. So he is generating a lot of contributions, whatever the individual sums may be, by posing as upholding the cause of the Palestinians. Battalion Span is not a place where the Palestinians are the subject of the main political or social discussion, never has been. So why has Galloway surfaced there? Because after being ousted in 2015 from Bradford West, Galloway has failed to get even a token elected position anywhere. And he knows that having an elected position, which he can then further exploit and parasite himself with by claiming to the British politician who supports the Palestinian cause. The Palestinians are not gaining anything because of Galloway. Palestinians are losing because of Galloway. Just like their anti-apartheid campaign that the racists in Britain kind of operated during the apartheid regime, the appearance of surfacing of Galloway as a friend of the Palestinians does serious long-term and immediate harm to the cause of the Palestinians. As a narcissist, opportunist, careerist himself, George Galloway knows that he's the only white-skinned British quote politician that can get a headline by claiming to be a champion of the Palestinians. But he is no less racist, no more intelligent than his contemporary counterpart racists in the main parties and the ordinary public in the UK. Which is why he talks about Palestine, but he doesn't make any difference for the good of the Palestinians. Galloway has not risked his parasite opportunistic spot by taking part in any anti-racist movement in this country ever. Whenever he has surfaced on the periphery, he has done so in order to promote himself. For example, in Tower Hamlets, he surfaced just before the 2005 general election. But he surfaced by what he must have done by studying the events in the constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow, where the then sitting MP, Una King, had actually supported the attackers of the Palestinian people. And when challenged, Una King had countered not by apologizing for her stance against the Palestinians, but by defying the Palestinians and the members of the public in the constituency who were generally and still are supportive of the Palestinian people. Una King had said, if they don't accept or agree with me, they know what they can do. They can get rid of me at the next election. Which is exactly what the voters in Bethnal Green and Bow did at the May 2005 election. They voted for something who was not Una King. And it was George Galloway. They did not vote for him because of any principle, any ethics, any morality whatsoever. They voted on the pretense that Galloway presented of being a supporter of the people of Palestine. And they voted on the fact that they didn't want Una King to stay. It wasn't a qualitative, principled value that George Galloway ever represented or personified that got him the votes. So whatever he has said in the last 10 days has been absolutely false and fabricated. For example, his row on the top of what appears to be a bus with a Channel 4 reporter, a female Channel 4 reporter, he treated with racist scorn. Then he treated Martine Croxall of the BBC, a white woman, a blonde white woman from Leicester. And George Galloway is transparently racist in his behavior. And he orchestrated the various appearances at various events outside the Israeli embassy, where hardly any mentionable white people attended. It was all Muslims and mainly Arabs. that attended. So he exploited his whiteness, white skin. That is a business. It's a business card for him. It's a racist business card. And none of the Fleet Street papers are talking about what Galloway did in Bethnal Green after getting elected, what George Galloway did before getting elected in Bradford West, and since losing the battle of public support in the constituency, what he did against Nawaz Shah. He actually personally attacked Nawaz Shah in a racist way, and George Galloway is somebody who supports rape. He supported many of the rapists in the news, personified by one of the very widely alleged rapists. Julian Assange. So there is a coincidence there. Julian Assange is a supporter of the Russian regime, and Galloway is given a spot on Russia television by the Russian state. The piece in the Financial Times by Ban Ki-moon, who was a former Secretary General of the United Nations, is headed, "The US should back a new approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict." Now that headline is itself wrong. It's not an equal kind of situation there. So it's not a conflict. It's an occupation of Palestine by Israel. That's the fact. There is a long read about Iran, or big read, and it says that with the low election turnout highlighting the need for change, the Islamic Republic's hardline leaders are realizing they must bridge the gulf between the theocratic regime and Iranians' desire for liberties. All of these articles in the Financial Crimes are apparently kind of less corrupt and less racist and less anti-Muslim than the rest of Fleet Street, but they are all carrying and running the same agenda, the same narrative, the same set of lies, the same mindset. So they are sick, but the sickness is disguised. The financial crimes is one of the English language print papers in the whole of the world that is mostly regarded as a sober newspaper with integrity. I would like to recognize the evidence to support that, but there is no evidence to support that. Editorial pieces, the comment pieces, the news pieces are disguised. For example, they're not as loudly anti-Muslim and racist as the Scum, the Daily Mail, the Daily Beaverbrook, or this Daily Scar, of course. But they carry the same message, the same agenda, they perpetrate the same agenda. This is the same narrative. And as we said about tomorrow's Batley and Span by-election, the Fleet Street papers are not containing or do not contain anything in their so-called reports or their headlines that actually tell the truth about what is going on in Batley and Spen. And they most certainly don't say anything whatsoever about George Galloway and his role and his behavior while he was in place as MP in the name of Bethnal Greenbow or in the name of Bradford West. And in between, Galloway has been exposed as a supporter of the worst racist, worst anti-Muslims in the UK and in the USA because he has colluded in propaganda displays with Donald Trump's main strategist, the fascist Steve Bannon. Galloway tried in between, since losing his seat in 2015 at Bradford West. Now this is now 5 years and Galloway has tried to get electoral kind of legitimacy. He has been totally, overwhelmingly rejected by the electors. Let's see what the votes were in his bid. So he first became an MP in 1987, June 1987, and he was there in place until the 11th of April 2005. So that was Glasgow Kelvin, 1987 to 1997. And he was no longer an MP for 5 years, 7 years, I think, 8 years. And he became an MP again in May 2005. And then he became an MP again, 29th of March 2012 in Bradford West. And he was not in elected office anywhere. So his entry on him, Wikipedia that I'm looking at right now, is full of allegations about money. And as I said before, not today, but in previous publications, it's not something that the Wikipedia entry includes. But George Galloway was accused of serious financial kind of receipt of finance from the Pakistani regime connected with Benazir Bhutto. And what Galloway did against the Daily Telegraph, as it then was, he didn't do against the Newsnight program. So we've said that before, that Newsnight made an extensive, very detailed series of allegations and claims against George Galloway about money that Galloway received from the Pakistani politician or Pakistani politician Benazir Bhutto's regime. And Galloway has not sued the BBC, nor the Newsnight, nor anybody else over that particular publication of that report by the Newsnight program. It clearly is part of the Fleet Street criminals' agenda to collude with the dishonest, untruthful, false, parasitical appearance of George Galloway in Batley and Spen, that they don't mention any of the events that are factually verifiable. Factual verification of the Newsnight program is possible, but the Fleet Street papers and commentators, so-called, are not remotely interested in referring to that. Nor is the BBC, nor was Martin Croxall, nor was the Channel 4 reporter, who was not European and therefore was treated with manifest racist, dismissive attitude by Galloway, as compared to the attitude Galloway displayed to Martin Croxall. Because Martin Croxall actually asked him many more things and was much more hostile than the Channel 4 reporter concerned on the top of the bus. So everything Galloway kind of claims about his voicing the kind of concerns of the people of Palestine or the people against racists, people of mainly targeted Muslims in the UK, is shallow. You go back to the stance he took before the 2010 general election about the water deprivation policy taken by the Indian government against Bangladesh. And it disappeared from the agenda. He made bombastic claims about knowing about the water policy of India and the impact on the Bangladesh society, on the Bangladesh people. But mysteriously, that disappeared. And the reason is not difficult to find. Because some of the people in Tower Hamlets, where he was standing for the second time, and that was a stand he was boastfully making against Jim Fitzpatrick at the May 2010 general election. Galloway must have been told that he was out of order. He wasn't out of order to actually take up the issue, but he was told that he was out of order because he won't be getting the votes of the people who sympathize with the Bangladesh government or regime that is loyal to the Indian regime. So Galloway is open to negotiation, let's say. And the Navarro media is obviously fronted by a bunch of absolutely idiotic trendies. They claim that Galloway actually went to Bangladesh. That we're talking about the election 2005 election. Before that, they were wrong because Bangladesh is not a constituency like the Bethnal Green and Bow. And no individual person could go to Bangladesh and canvass for electoral benefit in a constituency in the UK. Galloway didn't know a single Bangladeshi. He was taken there as part of an exhibition. And he was introduced to people that didn't know him. But for purpose of pictures, etc., and for misrepresenting the claim that he knew Bangladesh, so much so that he went to Bangladesh. He went to a village. He went to 2 or 3 locations. That's it. He met people, had some meals, and had some meetings. They had no interest in the election, except that they had relations in the constituency, and they could be, the most they could do would be to make a phone call or two, tell them to vote for Galloway. That's it. These are creepy things. These are not democratic events. These are creepy behavior on the part of somebody who doesn't know the people, but needs to come across as knowing the people. Get it? Galloway, of course, was paid by the Iranian television. I mean, it's not a very difficult intellectual challenge to understand what Galloway did as a result of being hired by Iranian television. He praised the Iranian television, the Iranian regime. He doesn't do that anymore because the British state has stopped the Iranian television being broadcast in the ordinary sense. And Galloway could not get a contract, a placement with the Iranian regime. That's it. In the wiki entry, there are hundreds of entries, references to Galloway, which means he has been mentioned hundreds of times. And most of those references can be verified and checked to the extent that they can be. And most of the evidence would amount to Galloway being a phony. on every issue that he has claimed to be a champion of. So why are the Fleet Street criminals and the BBC not actually referring to Galloway's actual record and shallowness? And why are they silent about why neither the constituents or electors in Bethnal Green and Bow or in Bradford West, they cannot find one single elector from any of these constituencies to say a kind word about Galloway? Why? Why can't they find anyone? Galloway supported the wrong things in Tower Hamlets when we didn't guide him. Literally, the Khoodeelaar campaign prevented George Galloway from being sunk in Tower Hamlets, as we have said in the past. We created a defense of the democracy in the constituency to prevent Tony Blair and his supporters in the constituency from mounting what would have been guaranteed to be a recall election, which Galloway would have lost following his appearance in the pornographic show called Big Brother House on Channel 4 in January 2006. We assert that we stopped Galloway being sunk, literally, by the supporters of Tony Blair. And Galloway needed us, which is why he appeared on various Khoodeelaar platforms supporting the Khoodeelaar campaign. Literally that. There was nobody in the so-called East London mosque controlling cabal that could come out politically in defense of George Galloway. We assert this, let them deny it. They cannot deny it because they didn't exist. They couldn't exist. They couldn't do it. George Galloway switches back and forth from being a racist with the racist zealots, and being concerned about the Muslims. He has no evidence anywhere, ever, in the now extended, exaggerated period of 50 years in politics, taking up any stand, making a stand against racists in any significant, serious way whatsoever. We assert that. Let Galloway deny it with date and chapter and verse. He cannot do it. Galloway supported the crooks. They supported the crooks in a most brazen and shameless, dishonest way. Galloway claimed in utterances that we recorded in front of him, we put our recorder in front of him, and there were other people recording it. Galloway claimed in April 2006 that in 30 years of his being in, quote, politics, he had never come across a local council as corrupt as Tower Hamlets Council. Galloway said that on the record in April 2006 at a small event held in the premises then owned by Ajmal Hussain in Brick Lane. We shall be going on the details more about that in the next parts.